On today's show, the NBA schedule is now officially out. Every team has 80 games scheduled. That includes the Hawks. We'll get into some of the highlights, some of the key dates, some of the games to watch, your questions, and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 2038 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Thursday afternoon/evening here in mid-August. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances right now with Monarch Money and use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for half off your first year. I also want to encourage you at the top of the show, as I always do, to make Locked On Hawks your first listen each and every day. Check us out and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. That includes Apple and Spotify. We are also on places like YouTube, for example. Please like this video as you are watching it and tell your friends, your colleagues, your family members, even your enemies about this podcast. It's actually going to be our 7th episode of the month of August here on August 14th as I record this. That includes visits from Glenn Willis and Frank Madden, a lot of Trae Young extension talk, your mailbag questions, and much more on the pod. But today we will be, I would say, centrally focused on the NBA schedule release. In the last few days, there have been some leaks. The Hawks announced their exhibition schedule, the MLK Day schedule came out, the Christmas schedule, some of the opening week schedules, but then finally at 3:15 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday afternoon, the league announced the full schedule for the season. Now, I said this in the intro, but only 80 games are actually scheduled because of the NBA Cup. There's some dynamics in play there. You end up having to play 82, I promise you that, but only 80 of them are on the schedule right now. But there is a lot to get to about the Hawks. I will not go game by game, even though I'm kind of tempted to do that. I won't do that, but I have a lot of highlights, a lot of notes about the schedule. And again, rest assured, 82 games, maybe even 83 games. If the Hawks make it to Vegas again, and this time make the final of the NBA Cup, you actually play 83 games. We'll talk about that later on in the podcast. But I want to begin at the very beginning of the schedule. And look, full caveats apply here. I'm not going to tell you that any of this stuff is going to change the trajectory of the season. Sometimes, though, it can matter. Like if you get an injury at a wrong time, if you're playing teams that are banged up at the right time, like the way the NBA clumps these games together sometimes, you might play an opponent 3 times in a month, and if they're banged up, that's an advantage to you, and vice versa. Same thing with, the dregs of the league, basically, when you get to like March, if you're playing the right teams at those times that maybe are banged up or not trying as much, it's kind of silly season at the end of the year, that can matter too. So that's why we get into this stuff, but I will also say, it matters how good you are, much more than it matters when you're playing the schedule that you're actually playing. With that said, I think we're going to learn a lot about the Hawks early in the season this year because of the schedule that they were given on Thursday. The opening game of the year is actually a pretty friendly matchup. It's actually the Toronto Raptors coming to State Farm Arena for the opener. That's on basically the general opening night is Wednesday, October 22nd. There's a doubleheader the day before that the Hawks are not going to be involved in nationally, but most of the league opens on that Wednesday. And the Raptors coming to town, that's a game the Hawks will be favored in, I would imagine, and a good, I would say, way to ease into things a little bit. Not a gimme by any means. Toronto's got some talent, but not a terribly tough matchup on opening night. But then from there, it gets harder. First time on the road is against Orlando. Orlando is going to be pretty good this year. It's a road game against a divisional opponent and a rival opponent. Then it's a back-to-back with travel to face the Oklahoma City Thunder at home. All right, welcome to the season. You face the reigning champs who are loaded again on a back-to-back with travel. Not easy. Then you go on a 4-game road trip. You do have Brooklyn on that road trip, and they're very bad, but the rest of the schedule on that trip is Chicago, Indiana, and Cleveland. Chicago and Indiana, not great shakes, but Cleveland's very good, and that's also just road games. Then you come home for Orlando again, tough game. You play Toronto again at home, not so bad. Then the Lakers, who are good, not probably as good as their actual moniker would suggest, but they're certainly a talented team with LeBron, Luka, etc. Then you have a 4-game West Coast trip, and then you have to play Detroit and San Antonio. So that's the first 16 games. Only a couple of those will the Hawks be like comfortably favored, and you want to start strong. I'm not saying it's going to change the whole season, but what you don't want to do is start 5-11 and be looking up and like what happened here. Now, I'm not projecting that to happen, but certainly no favors given at the beginning of the season if you are the Hawks. Now, at the end of the season, the schedule is also pretty difficult. The last 4 games of the year are Knicks, at Cavs, home for Cavs, and then at Miami. So 4 pretty tough games. I think I'm pretty low on Miami right now, but a road game in Miami, if both teams are trying at the end, is not really easy. And again, caveats apply here. You never know what teams will be playing like, what they will actually have incentive to play for, who's going to be healthy in April, which is why I focus a little bit more on the beginning of the schedule. But the end of the schedule will not be the most easy thing if the Hawks want to kind of press it all the way to the floor gas-wise to try to get a higher seed at the end of the season. The other big thing that everyone always asks about and kind of holds their breath about on the schedule is how many national TV games that a team might have. This year, the Hawks have announced they have 13 national TV games. Now, I always in the past have separated the ESPN and formerly TNT games from what used to be NBA TV. NBA TV was listed as a national TV game by the NBA, but it was really not national. NBA TV, yes, that game would be shown out of market, but it was also on the local product, and it was a very small bump as far as like exposure in that setting. Now the entire TV deal and TV landscape has changed around the NBA beginning this year. ESPN is still there, but now the other partners, and there are 3 instead of 2, are NBC and Peacock, but primarily NBC, who owns Peacock, and then also Amazon Prime Video is the third with a full package on the NBA. So technically, the Hawks have 13 games that are on national platforms. 3 on ESPN, 3 on NBC, 4 on Peacock, and 3 on Amazon Prime. It is still a TBD. In fact, I heard from someone this week that knows things usually. It is still TBD on whether those Peacock games and those Prime games are exclusively on those services or not. The Hawks, in their announcement of the schedule today, did include that games not exclusively on national platforms will still be televised and streamed by FanDuel Sports Network. That's their regional network that has Bob Rathman, Dominic Wilkins, etc. So obviously that's the main place you will watch Hawks games this year if you were in a local market, but it's still kind of a TBD. In the last edition of the NBA schedule, TNT games were almost always exclusive games, so it would be only there. ESPN games, a lot of those, like maybe you could simulcast, you might have ESPN or FanDuel. NBA TV games were always on FanDuel as well. We don't know about this time around, so keep that in mind. But the Hawks have basically what I would say 6 traditional national games, 3 on ESPN, 3 on NBC. Then you got 3 on Amazon. Amazon is a standalone, like certainly that. And then 4 on Peacock. And obviously Peacock is owned by NBC. That feels to me like kind of a secondary NBA TV-like spot. This is more games than the Hawks have had on national platforms for a few years. So that's a positive step forward. At the same time, I already saw Hawks fans mad about this, and I get it. There are teams that have a lot more than this. 34 is the most that any team has. That's the Lakers, the Thunder, the Warriors, and the Knicks are all at 34. That's almost triple what the Hawks have nationally. There's also another handful of teams that have at least 20 national games. The Wolves, the Rockets, the Cavs, the Nuggets, etc. It's the teams you probably would recognize. The Mavs are one where I'm not really sure why, other than Cooper Flag, I guess. But we will see. The only, I would say, true showcase game the Hawks have, like, primary platform, big NBA day is MLK Day. We'll get into that in a second when it comes to the Hawks. And by the way, spoiler alert, the Hawks do host MLK Day this year. That's a nice return. But we'll get into all the dynamics and play on that, plus more notes on the schedule in just one moment. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people cannot even name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth in the big picture, whether it's 401ks, properties, investments, etc. If you know the full picture, you actually end up leaving money on the table. And that is why Monarch Money can come into play for you. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together into one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. And Monarch Money does all the heavy lifting for you. You can link all of your accounts together in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet yourself. For me, I linked all of my accounts to Monarch and immediately spotted a few different subscriptions that I actually wasn't even using and I was still paying for. Canceling those by itself saved me money each and every month. Monarch can also make it simple if you want to review your finances with your partner in the same spot. You can actually both see your budgets, your goals, and your spending activities in one place. Do not let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with that code, and that code is LOCKEDONNBA. All right, before I dive into the MLK Day specifics, a couple of national folks, whether it be ESPN writers or media writers, have kind of pointed this out. this widespread change in the national TV deal, which I already just mentioned, the implementation of NBC, Peacock, Amazon, farewell to TNT, all of that. It also changes once football is over. But basically, the old structure was TNT had Thursday nights. That was their main night plus some Tuesdays. ESPN has always had Wednesdays and Fridays. It's all shuffled around now. So early in the year, with football still happening, you got Monday is going to be a Peacock night, Tuesday NBC and Peacock, Wednesday ESPN, for example. Friday is an Amazon night, including NBA Cup. They have the entire NBA Cup. All that stuff is on Amazon. And then after football ends, they move to Thursdays on Prime, basically. And then the weekend starts ramping up with ESPN, ABC, and Prime also doing some Saturdays, some Sundays, etc. So it's going to be interesting to navigate. I've already seen complaints. I'm not in charge of this. I get it. I've always not enjoyed how hard it is to watch games. I think, just the unclarity, like just the uncertainty, basically, all of this is going to frustrate some people, but we'll get used to it together and just follow along in that way. Anyway, MLK Day is the only showcase kind of game that the Hawks have on their schedule this year. It came out Tuesday. I referenced it briefly on the last show that I did, but the Hawks will host the Milwaukee Bucks at 1 p.m. Eastern time on MLK Day. First, they did not play at home on the day last year. I hated that and said as much on this show. It was the first time since 2017 they didn't play at home, and before that it was 1999. So basically, my entire semi-adult life, they have not played on MLK Day at home twice, and I'm almost 40. So there's that. Now they're back, and for me, they should always, always, always play at home on MLK Day. It's not hard. By the way, so should Memphis, and they're not this year. The Grizzlies, this is not Locked On Grizzlies. They should have a game as well. But Atlanta has one. There you go, this year. Now, more on this. I know fans were upset that it's the first game of the day. It's not prime time. It's 1 o'clock. That's different, obviously. They've had the first game before, I would say. It's pretty clear to me at this point that the Hawks are just going to have to prove it on the court to get the level of national showcase that I know some fans want them to have. I get it. I think they're going to be good this year. And people that in my life think they're going to be good this year. People that cover the league, not the Hawks. But as far as TV products are concerned, that's not always what matters. They use the brands that they think they're going to actually draw, and the Hawks haven't reached that level yet. That's just the reality. Whether you agree with that or not saying either way, but they're not quite there yet. It does help that the Bucks also have pretty modest projections this year, so I'm not surprised that Hawks-Bucks is the first game on that particular day. But the other thing that got people very mad was that it's only on Peacock. The rest of the schedule on that day is on NBC, with Peacock only as a secondary. The Hawks game is on Peacock as the primary and the announcement. Now, again, going back to what I said before, we don't know yet if that means Peacock exclusive or Peacock and FanDuel. If it's on FanDuel, people will be less mad, I think. But if it's only Peacock, standalone on MLK Day, it feels, from what I saw, people felt disrespected. I get that. It looked a little bit weird on the announcement. And again, reminder that everything's changed now. But that clarity is coming. But generally speaking, I would say if you are a diehard NBA fan or anything close to that, you're going to need Peacock and you're going to need Amazon. So I know people have Amazon for shipping. I know I do. Amazon Prime just is like a utility that I have. But Peacock's going to be necessary. If you want to watch basketball in full this year, you're going to have it. But anyway, they're starting the NBC schedule on MLK Day at 2:30. But the Hawks game's at 1. It's on Peacock only. We will see. Now, they could have started at noon, I will say. The Hawks don't generally like to tip that early, so that might be part of it. Maybe they would have preferred 1 o'clock, even with Peacock. But regardless, it's 1 p.m. Eastern time. People are mad about that. I totally get it. But Peacock in itself will be a part of NBA watching at this point in time. And again, they have other national games. They do have NBC games. They do have ESPN games. Those can also change. We've seen, unfortunately, for the other side of this, the Hawks have lost some national games during the season recently when they have not played well, or the other opponents. Like, for instance, last year they had a Spurs game that got pulled because Wemby was unavailable. Like, that stuff happens. It's not always about the Hawks, but just stay tuned. Right now, it's 13 games, and 6 of them are on the kind of prestige-y places. Elsewhere, West Coast trips. Always interesting to kind of follow when those are going to be because they kind of mark the season. They're difficult. But the Hawks this year, as a spoiler, don't have any super duper long road trips. They have 2 West Coast trips. They're both 4 games. 4 games in November at the Clippers, at the Kings, at the Jazz, at the Suns. Not terribly difficult there. The Jazz are bad, for example. The Kings might be bad. The Suns might be bad too. So that's not too bad schedule-wise. Then a 4-gamer in mid-January. That one is harder. It's Denver, Golden State, the Lakers, and the Blazers. No easy ones there, and that's more of a challenge. The Hawks do not have their usual LA double last few years, they've usually played the Lakers and Clippers in like a weekend or over a couple of days. That is not happening this year. If you want to make a trip to Los Angeles, which I tend to almost want to do, not available to you this year for 2 games. They do have one very, very road heavy stretch of the season, and it's actually 7 road games in the first 15 days of January. So to begin 2026, they have 7 road games in 15 days. They have 1 home game in the middle of that. So basically, it's 2 road trips around 1 home game and 7 of the first 8 on the road in January. That's probably the toughest run of geography on the schedule, but there you go. So again, no super long individual road trips. Teams really like that. They hate being gone for 2 weeks, and they also have one of those this year. They do have some long homestands. They have a big homestand over Christmas, over the holidays. They have 5 games at home in a 9-day period from December 19th through December 27th. Not on Christmas, but if you are in town for the holidays, if you are someone who's not living in Atlanta, or if you are welcoming your family in, there will be opportunities to be at State Farm Arena. 5 home games in 9 days around Christmas. Take vacation or whatever, lots of home games in that spot. The longest home stretch, though, is actually late February into March. They have 10 out of 11 games at home over about a 3.5-week period. Only 1 road game in there. It's actually to Milwaukee, so a pretty easy trip, generally speaking. A very, very home-heavy stretch in there. Holidays. MLK Day, obviously, I talked about earlier. They have a Black Friday game against the Cavs. That's the day after Thanksgiving. Come back to that in a second. That Christmas stretch, not actually on the day. And the only other holiday game is actually they play New Year's Eve in the afternoon against Minnesota. That'll be a fun game. Anthony Edwards, all of that. They have 3 series this year. And what I mean by that is like 2 games in one place. 2 of those actually, though, are at home. They play the Bulls in a 2-game series in December. They play the Wizards in a 2-game series at home in February. They only have 1 road trip to the same city for 2 games. It's Toronto, actually, in early January. So nothing crazy there. They have 5 afternoon games this year. MLK Day is one of them. December 21st, 3:30 against the Bulls. That New Year's Eve game against the Wolves. They have a game on February 22nd, an afternoon game against the Brooklyn Nets. And then March 14th, that 1 home game there against the Bucks in the afternoon. So if you are someone who might have smaller kids, want to be afternoon games, there are 5 opportunities to do that for the Hawks this year, to even watch games, much less be in the building. They only have 4 super late games. I made fun of this, but when they announced the schedule of the first week earlier this week around the league, there's a Lakers-Clippers game that is tipping off at 11 p.m. Eastern time. And that scared a lot of people, including me. But that's not the frequent thing, apparently, but just keep that in mind. But anyway, the Hawks have 4 games at 10 p.m. Eastern time or later. 2 of those in November in 3 nights, and 2 of those in January in 3 nights. So for someone like me who has to stay up very late on those nights, I'm grateful for only having 4 super late ones. There are some 9s, some 9:30s, etc. There's some 8 o'clock home games as well, going back to that, well, if you were the Hawks, but nothing crazy there. And one more thing before we get to the rest of the pod is that they have 13 sets of back-to-backs this year. I'm still determining if that's like an outlier number for this season, but 13 is not a crazy number overall. The Hawks actually announced that number themselves. They have, in the schedule, they have 2 home back-to-backs, so no travel, staying in your own bed. Those are the easiest. They have 1 home-road back-to-back, not so bad. They have 3 road back-to-backs, which are actually really hard because you never come home. And then they have 7 road to home back-to-backs. Just odd. So basically what that means is most of the time they would play a game on the road, they fly home, and then they'd be at home for the next day. Those are a little bit easier because you're coming home, but still nothing terribly easy about that. And we'll get into some more of this detail later on about who they play in the Eastern Conference 3 times versus 4 times, and also some notable matchups on the schedule, NBA Cup, plus mailbag questions, and it's all coming up in just one moment. All right, every year there is a little bit of a schedule intricacy about who you play 3 times versus 4 times in your own conference. As a refresher, you play everyone in the West twice, and then you play everyone in the East at least 3 times. But this year, it actually broke pretty well for the Hawks. They get the Knicks, Bucks, Bulls, Pistons, Pacers, and Sixers 3 times instead of 4. So basically what that means is they play the Wizards and the Hornets 4 times each. They're in their division, so that always has to happen, but the Wizards are going to be bad. Hornets, TBD. They also have the Nets 4 times and the Raptors 4 times. So if you were trying to pick the teams you want to play 4 times, you would pick The Nets first, probably, followed by the Wizards, and then you would certainly be getting into the Hornets and Raptors pretty quickly. So that's pretty favorable. Again, not a huge like game breaker on the schedule, but it is very helpful to have those extra games against projected to be bad opponents. Matchups that are notable on the schedule for obvious reasons. Here's some of these. Porzingis going back to Boston for the first time, January 28th. Atlanta and Boston play 4 times. That's the first one in Boston, though, so I'm sure he'll get a rousing welcome back to Boston. Nickeil Alexander-Walker going back to Minnesota on Monday, February the 9th. Nickeil is very well liked in Minnesota. I had Dane Moore on the show a couple weeks ago talk about that and talk about Nickeil in general. He is very, very well liked, and that's a positive indicator. I'm sure there'll be a fun atmosphere there. I mentioned before the Thunder come to town, the 3rd game of the season. On the bright side, it's a Saturday in October, so a lot of football, I'm sure. But I was told by someone immediately that it's actually the UGA bye week. That doesn't apply to everybody, but I know there are a lot of UGA fans that are Hawks fans. Could be helpful for the crowd. The Lakers come to town November 8th. That's a Saturday game, always lively there. The Warriors come to town on March 21st, a Saturday. That's, of course, Steph Curry coming to town there. Jokic and the Nuggets come Friday, December 5th. That is always fun. And then the Pelicans games are 2. Obviously, if you are not familiar, the Hawks have a very, very clear interest in the Pelicans this year for draft reasons. They play them twice at New Orleans on November 22nd, and then they come to Atlanta on Wednesday, January 7th. Similarly to the Bucks, they play the Bucks 3 times. I talked about this, by the way, with Frank Madden on the show last week or 2 weeks ago about the Bucks. MLK Day, and then they play them twice in a 10-day period in March. All 3 of those games, by the way, are on national TV. Interesting. And then Orlando's the other team that I want to at least mention. Division race last year came down to the end between the Hawks and the Magic. This year, I think the team the Hawks are being compared to the absolute most in the league is probably Orlando. After that's probably Detroit. It's probably those 3 teams in a bucket because most people, not everyone, but most people are kind of projecting Cavs, Knicks, and then kind of a 3-team battle royale between the Hawks, the Magic, and the Pistons. But Orlando being in the division, they played them 4 times. They played them twice at the end of the year as well on national TV. But keep that in mind, lots of Orlando games happening in the near future. Also, one more note quickly here. Our friends at Positive Residual, they do a great job. It's positiveresidual.com. They do a schedule analysis that's just like, algorithm-based, math-based, etc. At the moment, they just posted their update. The Hawks, according to them, have the 3rd easiest strength of schedule in all of basketball. That's very, very helpful, I would say. They also have 10 games where they have rest advantages. And according to this, they also have 10 with rest advantages. So nothing crazy in the schedule, break even there, and a friendly schedule again, because of what I said before about who you play 3 times, who you play 4 times, you're playing the East, of course, and all of that fun stuff. All right, NBA Cup. Scheduled games, we already knew who they're going to be playing, but now we know when they'll be playing them. It's October 31st, Halloween, at Indiana. I think the Hawks are better than the Pacers this year. That's a game that's, though, a pretty interesting test early in the season, like a week into the season, playing a team that's going to be frisky and well-coached. Then November 7th against Toronto, 25th against Washington on the road, and then November 28th, that's Black Friday, day after Thanksgiving, that has a pretty good chance, I would say, to decide the group. Obviously, you don't know that now by any means, but the 2 best teams, in my opinion, big holiday crowd, real stakes, that'll be fun, I would say. A semi-holiday game, that'll be a good one for the Hawks and the people in the building. Of course, as a refresher, the top 8 make the knockout round. There are 6 groups, the winners plus 2 wildcard teams. Last year, the Hawks won their group, made it all the way to the semifinals. It's as it was last year, quarterfinals in the home stadiums, and then the final 4 in Vegas in mid-December. If the Hawks do not make the top 8 and go to the knockout round, they will have 2 games scheduled for them to get to 82. So right now, again, they have 80 on the schedule, 2 more coming, either in knockout play or in rescheduled play. And by the way, for the record right now, the Hawks are 13-1 at FanDuel to win the NBA Cup. Last year, they were like 80-1 or 100-1. They didn't win it, but they came close. Also, in the group, they are only 2-1 right now to win the group. The Cavs are the favorite at plus 110. Then the Hawks, then the Pacers 6-1, Raptors 8-1, and Wizards 20-1. And generally speaking, going 4-0 is the easiest path to win it. You could win it 3-1. We will see. More of that to come, I promise you. All right, some questions before we get out of here from the mailbag about the schedule. First one comes from Ian. Ian says, if you could pick 5 home games to go to this year with no restrictions, which ones would you pick? This is a hard one because it's all about personal preferences. I'm going to try to spread them out a little bit here and just highlight some that I like. I would say the Thunder game would be high on the list. Reigning champions coming to town. Orlando has 2 games. The first one I would say November 4th, NBC game, probably a little bit more juice in the building for that one. And again, measuring stick game for the Hawks. I want to go watch Jokic December 5th. It's a Friday night. Jokic for me is the best player in the world. I want to watch him always. Good crowd, good opponent, all of that. I personally would always choose MLK Day. Great atmosphere. The choir introductions has been a staple for a long time. Also a good game. Giannis is in town. The Bucks are going to be decent as long as he's playing. Early tip-off, for me, that's probably a good thing. Getting home to watch more basketball or football or whatever. And then from there, it's like you got Minnesota, I would say Houston, Golden State, and the Lakers. One of those 4. Dealer's choice, whether you're an Edwards fan, if you're a Kevin Durant fan, if you're a Steph Curry fan. The Laker game might be LeBron's last trip to Atlanta. That's always conceivable. So that might be one that's interesting. Plus the Hawks and Hawks fans hate Luka, I would say. At least a lot of them do. So 15 options, I would say, for 5 spots, but that's just a pretty good overview of some highlight games, I would say. The other ones in the East, again, would probably be, maybe Cleveland games. Black Friday would be a good one too, NBA Cup wise. If you are certainly watching NBA Cup, that'd be on the list. Orlando, Knicks, lots of options, I would say. Troyer asks a question that says, I think about taking a road trip, quote unquote, with the Hawks at some point this year. What's the best one that is somewhat logical geographically? 3 options here, I would say. If you want to go on the long one that's challenging, I would do the second West Coast trip. It's Denver, San Francisco, Los Angeles for the Lakers, and then Portland. Tough travel, but certainly it would be a fun one and some good games. If you want a little bit shorter and 2 awesome cities, the Hawks have a trip where they play a game in New York at MSG against the Knicks. And then they go to Toronto for 2 games in 3 days. So you can do, with 3 flights, you can go Atlanta to New York to Toronto to Atlanta. 3 games, 2 awesome cities to visit. Toronto's not very good, I don't think, but they're not terrible. They have talent. Awesome cities to visit. I would like that one a lot. Have your passport with you, of course. And then for a short one, I would say maybe Dallas and Houston. They play March 18th and March 20th, Dallas and Houston. There's a day between if you want to do some sightseeing, get some barbecue or whatever, maybe drive it if you wanted to. You can fly it together. Manageable travel, 2 good, interesting opponents. That's the one I'd highlight as well. So you can't do the LA double this year, but the Texas double perhaps would be appealing. And last question on the podcast comes from Phil, who says, I've had season tickets for the Hawks for years. I always miss a couple of games and give my tickets away rather than trying to sell them. Are there any that stand out as games that I should proactively bail on? That's funny. Pretty much the inverse of the question about the best games. Look, I go to all games that I can go to for work purposes, but I do understand the sentiment. I don't want to give you some skips if you want to take some skips. Brooklyn comes to town twice this year. They're going to be awful, I think. So even if you don't want to miss them, they come twice. So pick one of those and not go. My number 1 pick to skip all year, if you maybe choose one game, would be Thursday, March 12th against Brooklyn. I'll be there anyway because I'm working, but that's one. It's during the week. It's a bad opponent who comes twice. No thanks. Utah is going to be awful as well, I think. They come to town on Thursday, February 5th. They only come once. So if you're a big fan of like Lauri Markkanen or Walker Kessler, sure. But that's one I'd put on the list for sure. And then Washington comes to town twice. And they come to town twice in 3 days in February. So whichever one of those you want to pick, that's another one to skip. So if there's 3 games you want to skip, I would go Brooklyn number 1, one of the Washington games, and Utah would be my personal choices. But there are others that you could certainly argue on behalf. I know which ones I wouldn't skip. It's the good ones. But I get it. Not everyone's going to go to 41 games at home. I miss games too. I have a day job and have to travel and all that fun stuff. So strap in. We'll have a lot of content coming up in the near future, but it's going to be a lot of fun, I would say. I'm looking forward to the schedule. I start planning my potential road trips. I start planning my potential feature-y kind of stuff. The Hawks have, looking at all these travel things, rest advantages and miles traveled and back-to-backs and schedule analysis. In the end, again, it comes down to how good the team is. There are little things that can influence the performance as far as wins and losses. I am a fan, and by a fan, I mean I'm a believer in there are schedule losses in the NBA. Schedule can dictate some results sometimes, but that also is the case for everyone in the NBA. Keep that in mind too. So you want to be flat, you want to be even-handed about that, and we'll have much more to come, I promise, on the podcast. Programming notes. I am actually headed out of town. Next week I have episodes recorded. If anything crazy happens, I will break in with some more current stuff, but I have 2 guests coming on and a couple of 2-parters. So it'll be 4 episodes next week, a couple 2-part conversations. Stay tuned for that. Please subscribe to the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Follow the show on X/Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow the show on Blue Sky. If you want to, through me, it's at BT Rowland. I'm also on X/Twitter at that same handle, at BT Rowland. And then my non-podcast coverage of the Hawks can be found at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. As always, mark your calendars on the schedule, and we'll see you all next time.